what are they typically going to be facing here?
A world of pain. Whereas for MTD, that is going to be a more fundamental change.
I see a lot of stuff on LinkedIn about AI replacing accountants.
Let's say the incompetence of government. Clearly, there is more work to be done.
They're afraid that it's going to bring a lot of work onto their plate.
But actually, in reality, it's a bookkeeping problem.
It's going to get very interesting.
Whether those numbers will be reliable and accurate, who knows? The challenge will be...
Let's dive right into it. Hey everyone, welcome. I'm Logan Ransley, co-founder of Landlord Studio, and very excited to have joining us today John Toon, chartered accountant and technology advisory lead at Beever Struthers. Welcome, John.
Thanks, Logan. It's great to be with you, and exciting times for me and the accounting profession at the moment with MTD Opportunity coming down the track.
Yes, lots to talk about here. Very quickly moving sort of industry here, so really keen to sort of learn a little bit more about it. But yeah, I just want to sort of start. So you're one of the founders of Digital Disruptors Awards and host of the podcast Digi-Worlds in the aircrew world. Where you sort of discuss the latest in digital and cloud accounting news. So to anyone sort of listening in today who hasn't already tuned into this, definitely go check John Toon's podcast out and everything that he puts out. But would love to just get a real brief introduction and I guess how they both came about and what you sort of inspired to start them.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in the accounting industry for just over 20 years now, so I'm getting a bit old in the teeth, as it were. And but I think one of the things that kind of inspired Ryan, India, myself to kind of come up with the podcast a few years ago. I mean, we've been doing it for 4 years now. I think we've got to almost 150 episodes or so. Was that we felt there was a sort of a missing gap in terms of particularly in the UK around people talking about technology, and we were sort of seeing how important it was becoming for both accounting practices and their clients and bookkeeping practices as well. And we didn't feel like there was one singular resource that you could go to in terms of being able to keep up with the latest developments and news and everything else. And as I'm sure you're aware, Logan, like the world of technology moves faster and faster every day, and people like yourselves at Landlord Studio pumping out updates to products all the time, and we were just seeing that people were just massively overwhelmed with that. So the purpose of the podcast is really just to go out weekly to kind of provide that update and some insight into what's going on. Hopefully we can provide some commentary, and we do interviews with people in the industry as well to sort of get everyone up to speed. And then alongside that, we did run a number of events like the awards that we ran fairly recently just before Accountex North, and some social things which are really, again, just around bringing the community of people together. So bringing both vendors and accountants and bookkeepers all together in one place to kind of just share knowledge and information, contacts, etc., and make that really easy for everyone to kind of like get into the world that we're living in at the moment.
Yeah, and with everything going on with AI and stuff, it's probably prompted some very interesting topics, I'd imagine.
Right. Absolutely. So, well, everyone wants to talk about AI, don't they? But
yeah, exactly. What's been interesting is, I mean, AI has been around for a very long time, but now it's become mainstream, and obviously the technology is advanced. But yeah, I guess you're really living and breathing all this digital transformation in the accounting world. And just to sort of start off, I wanted to sort of ask you what 3 tools or updates in the accounting and tech industry are you most excited about at the moment, and why?
Oh gosh, that's a really great question. I mean, I think for me, we've been long-term like Dext receipt bank users, and I think one of the things that really excites me is that for a product that's quite mature in the market, they're still pumping out loads of interesting updates and like innovative things. And I think when we kind of like compare and contrast with some of the people in the market, that level of innovation seems to have dropped away a little bit, which is somewhat disappointing. So I think for me that makes them really stand out. I mean, the other stuff that we also see in that similar sort of space is Free Agent. Again, have really like kickstarted their progress. Switching from being a product that focused on a very very niche area to being a slightly more broad, more competitive product with the likes of Xero, QuickBooks, and Sage. And it's been interesting to watch their kind of journey and how they've kind of worked on developing their ecosystem of products and things. I mean, obviously, it'd be remiss of me not to mention Landlord Studio because it's very exciting to see you guys in the market. And obviously, MTD has prompted some of this development and stuff, but also we know that managing portfolios for landlords it can be quite challenging. It's often done in spreadsheets, and they don't get great visibility of like what's actually happening with their properties. They've kind of got a general overview. They know if they're making money or not, but if they've got more than one property, then what starts to happen is we get a feeling that's like actually they'll probably know if they're making money overall, but they don't know if they're making money on individual properties, and whether there's challenges around managing their tenants and things like that. So I think that's really fascinating. I guess the other one that for me we're using a huge amount of is like just general chat GPT. I think as sort of cliched as that may sound in this AI world, that is still every day I'm finding something out new about it. They're obviously releasing new functionality into it quite regularly as well, and it's not a lie to say that it's going to be a challenge for the accounting profession and other professions in the future, the capability of these kind of products. Whether ChatGPT lasts for another 4 or 5 years, who knows? But the reality is like you're able to do things with that product now that you weren't able to do 6 months ago, which genuinely challenge the tax advisory market, the more general advisory market, and in some respects a compliance market that we operate in.
Yeah, super interesting. And also, I mean, I see a lot of stuff on LinkedIn about AI replacing accountants. It's probably, I don't know how real that is for the accounting world, but there's obviously a hype around it. They are powerful tools, but,
Yeah.
I don't know if it's going to fully replace that industry at all. But
Yeah, it's a difficult one to answer because obviously we're still in quite an early stage of like the maturity and development of these products. Like if you
mm,
think about ChatGPT, it's only really been a couple of years, and there is so much to kind of see and do with these products. But I was talking to someone else earlier today about the capability of these products, and the fact that I've been toying around with something related to VAT and Zero, and I actually got ChatGPT to kind of help me spitball ideas around that, and then help me to build some Power Automate flows which connect to the API, like the Zero API, to kind of get data out of there and do stuff with it, and then push it back in. Like that's something that you probably couldn't have done 12 months ago with ChatGPT, or not reliably done anyway.
mm,
And now you can do it. And so if you kind of look at that and say, well, what kind of impact does that have on us as a business? It doesn't really have a big impact on us as a business at the moment, but what it does allow me to do is do more. And I think that's the kind of phase that we're in at the moment. I do perceive though that there will be a competitive phase at some point in the future where we're starting to see a little bit of it, where people are sort of saying, oh, I can now replace my accountant by using ChatGPT. Yes, you can, with some caveats. And I'm not going to get into the whole, oh, well, it just gives you nonsense answers, because that's not true. It gives you really great answers if you get the prompts right. The problem is like as a someone who doesn't have maybe the tax knowledge or the accounting knowledge or whatever it is that go with it, you can't always validate the responses that you get, and that's probably the most important thing. But
mm.
that is irrespective of that, it's going to have an impact, because what we're going to find is that clients will come to us and say, hey, instead of Googling it like I used to do a couple of years ago, I've chat GPT'd it, or I've asked Claude or Grok or whatever, and this is the response I got. Is it right? And so in some respects, that relationship between accountants and their clients is going to change, in terms of sometimes we might just be being asked to validate a response rather than providing more advice over the top.
It's going to be an interesting one. We're definitely seeing more and more people. I mean, even customers come in and sort of say, "Hey, can you incorporate some more AI features to help us with tax and accounting?" And yeah, it's going to get very interesting. But love to talk about the topic of today, which is making tax digital.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's a 10-year project in the making, but love to love to get your sort of view on it, your insight, and really just get sort of the essential summary of MTD and who it's actually going to impact among
Yeah.
clients in the industries.
Yeah, of course. I mean, like you say, it's been something that's what 10 years in the making. I mean, that's partly down to let's say the incompetence of government, or the lack of engagement with government, and probably a little bit of incompetence on HMRC side as well. But I mean, essentially, the whole MTD stuff was really about trying to digitize our tax system, or improve the technological development of our tax system. And that's no different from a whole bunch of other countries, some of which are way in front of us, some of which are behind us. But the reality is like, the way that we get data and information into our tax systems historically has been very manual. A lot of that has been done predominantly by accountants and bookkeepers, with some with some individuals doing it, or some businesses doing it themselves. But MTD sort of puts sort of like a lens on this, which says, right, actually, no, we want the interaction with HMRC to be digital as possible. And we've already gone through MTD for VAT a couple of years ago, and that wasn't too much of a challenge, I would say. I mean, some people may disagree with me, but I think for a lot of organizations, a lot of businesses doing VAT returns, the vast majority of them were doing them already in software. And so really what you had to just tweak was the software you were using. Whereas for MTD, for it, that is going to be a more fundamental change. So we've got this rollout that starts from the 6th of April 2026 next year, which captures any sole trader and or landlord where their income is over 50,000. So that's a reasonably high threshold, I guess. But it is going to bring in a big number of people that do personal tax returns. I can't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but I think it's around about a million tax returns or something are going to be brought into scope. Um, what that changes and how that changes things for people is going to be interesting, because I guess within this, organizations over 50,000, sole traders over 50,000 who are also above the VAT threshold will already be doing quarterly submissions for VAT. So moving to quarterly submissions for income tax maybe won't be too dissimilar to what they're already doing, and won't be too unfamiliar to them. But for landlords in particular, because they're not VAT registered and can't be VAT registered, this is going to have a big impact for them. And we know that landlords, some of them use software, and that software may be Excel. Some of them use proper accounting software, if you like, or proper property management software, but a lot of them don't. And so for them, this is going to have quite a big impact in terms of the way that they work and they operate. And that's where obviously you guys come in, and a whole bunch of others. Going forward after that, thresholds start to drop. So from April 2027, thresholds drop to 30,000. And then from April 2028, the proposal is to drop that threshold down to 20,000. So that will really start to capture a very broad range of people. And so probably, particularly in the landlord aspect, the landlords that are going to be outside of that threshold are probably going to be mainly single property landlords, the kind of ones that have bought a house and then moved in with a partner and kept the old house and done all that kind of stuff. That's kind of where you're going to be. But probably if you've got two properties, I guess, unless they're quite small or quite in a sort of a low value area, you're probably going to be above the threshold. So it's going to capture quite a bunch of people.
Yeah, particularly the joint owners and complex arrangements like that. That's probably one of the biggest challenges that we've actually heard from accountants,
Yeah.
is how you handle joint ownership, and particularly if you got five properties and different ownership structures across those five properties, and then yeah, it complicates the things. And what
Yeah.
the last thing the accountant wants is obviously paper landing on their desk. And so I guess in a way, the digital compliance is actually pushing it towards a methodology or method that is more in favor for the accountants, because it obviously means a lot more, systemized and digital work. But
Yeah.
I guess from your perspective, what does digital compliance actually mean in practice for these clients? Yeah, love to get those
Yeah.
thoughts.
I mean, I think for these clients, it does change the way that they interact. I mean, let's assume that they're not VAT registered, so they're not in that regime and they're not already doing stuff there. It does change the way that they interact completely, because for most personal tax, people, whether if they're submitting a return themselves or through an accountant or bookkeeper, their interaction with HMRC is just annual, genuinely, in terms of like getting that tax return done, which means their interaction with the professional advisor typically is fairly annual as well. And other than them making payments on account, if they're in that regime as well, where they pay in July as well as in January, it's quite a straightforward, simple process. It does mean that you can have people very late in the day submitting things as well, and so this is going to change the game quite a lot, because this move to quarterly returns and quarterly submissions is very significant. Now we know that there's a bit of leeway in terms of, like, the penalties and stuff. So I'm expecting that there'll be quite a lot of lag in the system in terms of people not necessarily submitting things as they should be doing in the intention of the rules. Um, but yeah, I think this is the big transition challenge for businesses and landlords, is like, how do we get into this regime of quarterly submissions? There's still quite a lot of confusion about what's actually required, even though it's quite simple set of requirements. And also, we look at this with a tax lens because we're talking about personal tax, but actually in reality it's a bookkeeping problem, to be fair, because this is about making sure that you keep your accounting records, however they may look and feel, up to date regularly so that you can do those submissions. And the reality for most people doing tax in a practice is that probably what they will just wait for is those 4 quarterly submissions to be completed, and then they'll step in and do kind of like the final tax return and this additional submission, which is for them kind of like business as usual almost.
And I've heard a lot of, I mean, a lot of sort of insight from accountants that, or sort of mixed views, where they're afraid that it's going to bring a lot of work onto their plate versus the opportunity that it might bring, and the positives. But sort of just going on from that, I guess there are many firms that are quite worried that there's going to be an increased workload here, and but also that they just see it as more work and requirements from HMRC rather than sort of an opportunity,
Yeah.
future opportunity for, systemizing, digitizing their own firm, and providing more value in that way. But I guess, how do you sort of see this? Like, how do you view it through this lens? Do you sort of see it as just more work, or do you see the opportunity here as well?
Well, I think in some respects it's a bit of both, and you make of that whatever you will in terms of what your strategy and your approach to this is. Clearly there is more work to be done, because, like I say, this is going to become a bookkeeping problem, and the challenge will be, I think, as the thresholds start to drop, is whether or not we can encourage clients to take up a bookkeeping service that we may provide directly or maybe through a third party, because that's going to be quite costly. I mean, if you know some rough estimates and some of the sort of rough pricing that I've seen from various organizations has been that they're probably going to start at a minimum threshold of maybe 250, 350 per quarter plus VAT to do that work and to do the submissions. Potentially that could be a lot more. It could potentially be a little bit less depending on the kind of service you offer. But if you kind of compare and contrast that with maybe that personal tax client has only ever paid maybe 250 or 350 pounds once to do a tax return annually off the back of the information that they provided, if it's suddenly multiplied up by 4 or 5 times, that's a big change, right? So there's definitely a pricing and an approach challenge to this. I think for the larger landlords, larger organizations, particularly in the early days, that'll be a cost that they can kind of probably swallow. Whether they want to or not is a different conversation, but that's something that they should be able to afford. So I think we'll see a trail of this as we go through the threshold changes. I think the other thing is that this isn't like the MTD for VAT thing either, because this is new. So I think what we're going to find is that we're probably going to find that landlords and sole traders want to make more use of probably things like bridging software, because they'll have stuff in Excel which they'll be reasonably competent in preparing. They'll just want to be able to make sure they can do that submission, and then that changes how we maybe interact with that, because some clients will be quite happy to submit that. Whether those numbers will be reliable and accurate, who knows? So we'll have to then deal with that at the year-end process. Some clients will want bookkeepers and accountants to sort of check and validate that information before they submit it, and some might want to pass that on to us for us to do on their behalf. So there's quite a few opportunities to do different things, different pricing levels and different service levels for this. I think the main big thing for me is that whenever I was working in direct practice with small clients in particular, was that quite often, because you tend to be down that compliance track and it's more of a reactive than a proactive service, is you'd get this frustration where you get the client records off them and you start preparing the accounts, and then it maybe get passed on to the tax team or you do the tax. And And then you suddenly realize, oh, like they've bought a car or they've bought something which maybe with a little bit of advice in advance they could have got some tax incentives for, or they might have been, might have been in a slightly better position from a tax point of view. So there is an opportunity with MTD, because we're going to see this data more regularly, to at least hopefully create an opportunity to potentially be more proactive. And that will be entirely down to the practice, the client as well, whether they're receptive to that as well. But that should be one of the opportunities that we try and look to explore, I think.
Yeah, and like the approaches taken by accounting firms is definitely, it definitely varies across every accounting firm. At least the ones that I've spoken to, some of them have got a full strategy. They've got their pricing locked in. They know how they're going to handle this. They know that they're going to do the submissions, or the client's going to do the submissions,
Yeah.
etc. And then some firms have no idea, and they're sort of just exploring tools now. But and that sort of leads me into final question. But I guess your view here, if a firm does nothing until next year, I mean, what are they typically going to be facing here?
A world of pain, I think is fair to say. I mean, I think if firms do nothing and wait until the 6th of April, I mean, I guess there's going to be a little bit of lag, isn't there? Because you're going to be doing the first quarterly return, in July, so you still got a little bit more time, I guess, if you're kind of like holding on to that burning fuse for a little bit longer. But I, I, I mean, I guess it depends on the approach that you're going to take with your clients and what your client base looks like. I mean, if you've got clients that are fairly well organized and maybe they're all doing stuff on software or Excel or whatever it might be, and you can sort of accommodate that, and there's not too much transitional change required, you could probably get away with leaving it reasonably last minute. I mean, it's not a great policy, but you could probably do that. If you've got lots of very manual driven clients where their records are kept on paper, they don't really have any systems or any processes in there, or even if they are doing stuff on Excel but it's not particularly reliable, or they're using some old piece of software that's not going to be compliant, then your transition change is going to be much higher in terms of like having to manage that process. And then of course, actually the key thing in part of this is like, what are you going to do from a communication point of view? Because there's no point in leaving this to the last minute and then your client's ringing you up going, hey, John, like I've got a return to complete tomorrow. Like, how do I do it? Because you're never going to be able to do that. If you've got 100 tax return clients or 1,000 tax return clients, you're going to be immediately overwhelmed. So for me, the thing that firms should be doing, even if they don't really have a really clear plan, for next year, is like, get your communication strategy sorted. Let's start to educate clients. Let's start to talk to them about what the requirements are going to be, what the potential impact's going to be, and also then figure out what's going to happen. Because like I say, you're going to have some clients who want to take additional services from you to do these quarterly returns, however that's badged, whether that's a full bookkeeping preparation and review and submission, whether it's just a review and submission service, or whether it's literally just giving them some guidance and like, here's how you become compliant. You're also going to have some clients who will look at the pricing of all of that and go, hell no, I don't want to deal with this, and I'm off. And so there will be some attrition of clients, I suspect, through this process. And so practices need to understand, like, what's that potential impact. If you were to lose, I don't know, 5% of clients because they decide that the pricing of MTD is way too high, what does that have? What does have an impact on from a practice point of view? Equally, what does the opportunity of having another maybe 5 or 10% revenue create in terms of like doing more work? And do you have enough staff to be able to deliver that service and things? So for me, the two key things that practices should be focusing on is communication out to clients to kind of like try and gauge what level of interest and impact you're going to have. And then number two is like, think about the strategic impact of that, and do you need to recruit? Because clearly, we're talking about this now in October, right? If you're trying to recruit someone, they're on a month's notice or 3 months notice, you're going to start getting really close to that kind of April deadline very quickly.
Yep, the time is ticking, and it's coming in pretty hot. So,
Yeah.
well, yeah, really appreciate it. And that's all for today's episode 1. So thank you for everyone listening in today. And if you found this helpful, make sure to tune in to the next episode where John and I tackle one of the biggest challenges accountants face, which is getting tech-resistant landlord clients on board with new software. So if you are looking for a landlord-specific solution that is MTD ready and easy for your clients to use, come visit us at landlordstudio.com to learn more about how we can support your firm and help you through this transition. And you can also book a demo there as well. So again, appreciate it, John, and definitely go check John Toon's podcast out and everything that he puts out. And until next time, we'll see you then.
Thanks, Logan. What's keeping the landlords awake at night? If you make a mistake, it usually costs you money.
How do we get them to adopt new software?
And avoid HMRC's watchful eyes. So there's a bit of a carrot and stick approach to this. They're just probably not that educated. Yeah, it's a huge mistake. I think if you don't turn it into a revenue opportunity, are you worried about being compliant for MTD?
No desire to change.
And the feedback we get from clients is really good, so which is going to be forced upon you whether you like it or not, and it can be a very tough conversation.